The morning after the storm. The first assault was the light. A merciless shard of morning sun, slicing through a gap in the heavy hotel curtains, stabbing directly into her retinas. Eliza groaned, a low sound swallowed by the unfamiliar plush carpet. Her head throbbed with a vicious, pulsing rhythm, each beat echoing the dull roar of regret already building in her gut. Where was she? This wasn't her apartment. The sheets beneath her fingers felt too smooth, too cool, unnervingly luxurious. The air tasted stale, thick with the ghosts of last night's, what? Panic, cold and sharp, pricked at the edges of her consciousness. She blinked, forcing her eyes open against the glare, the room swimming into a blurry focus. Expensive, impersonal decor. Clothes were scattered across the floor with reckless abandon. A delicate strap of her own black dress hooked precariously over the lampshade. Oh God! Her stomach plummeted. And then she felt it. The warmth beside her. The distinct, steady rhythm of breathing that wasn't her own. No. Please, no. Slowly, heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird, Eliza turned her head. Time seemed to warp, stretching into an agonizing eternity before her vision cleared, focusing on the profile beside her. Sharp jawline, dark hair tousled against the pristine white pillowcase, lips slightly parted in sleep. Recognition slammed into her with the force of a physical blow, stealing the air from her lungs. Julian Croft. Not just Julian, the boy she'd built sandcastles with, shared secrets with through awkward teenage years, the one constant male presence in her life who had always been strictly off limits. The repository of her history, the keeper of inside jokes no one else understood. Her best friend. But worse. So much worse. Julian Croft. CEO of Croft Enterprises. Her direct boss. The man who held her career, her ambitions, her entire professional future in his elegantly capable hands. The carefully constructed wall between them, the one built of shared history, mutual respect, and the unspoken understanding of their disparate roles, hadn't just been breached. It had been utterly demolished. Pulverized into dust by whatever madness had transpired last night. A wave of nausea washed over her. Her eyes darted around the room again, seeking evidence, confirmation of the disaster. His tailored jacket slung over a chair, her shoes kicked haphazardly into a corner, an empty champagne bottle lolling on the bedside table. And then, her gaze snagged on his shoulder, exposed by the rumpled duvet. Crimson marks, small crescent moons stark against his skin. Her nails. Her nails had done that. The visual proof sent a fresh surge of humiliation and self-loathing through her. How could she? How could they? This wasn't supposed to happen. Ever. Waking up beside a handsome stranger after a drunken mistake? Maybe embarrassing, possibly regrettable, but ultimately forgettable. A story to be laughed off later. But this was Julian. Waking up beside Julian felt like sacrilege. Like breaking a sacred vow she hadn't even realized she'd made. The thought of facing him, of walking into the office on Monday, of sitting across from him in meetings, it was inconceivable. Bile rose in her throat. What had possessed her? The university reunion? Yes, there had been wine. Lots of it. Nostalgia flowing as freely as the alcohol, old stories resurfacing, laughter echoing, and then? Nothing. A terrifying blank. Had she initiated this? Had she thrown herself at him? The memory refused to surface, leaving only the horrifying aftermath. He held all the power here. Professionally, and now, personally, in a way that made her skin crawl with vulnerability. This couldn't stand. She couldn't stay here. Couldn't risk him waking up, seeing the matching horror dawn in his own eyes. Or worse, what if he didn't see it as a disaster? What if, to him, this was just Tuesday? The thought was somehow even more unbearable. Action. She needed action. Escape. Moving with agonizing slowness, careful not to disturb the man beside her, Eliza slid out from under the duvet. The cool air hit her bare skin, raising goosebumps. Shivering, more from adrenaline than cold, she crept across the floor, gathering her discarded clothes. Each rustle of fabric sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. Her hands trembled as she fumbled with buttons, pulled on her dress, searched frantically for her shoes. Dressed, shoes clutched in one hand, purse in the other, she risked one last glance back at the bed. The sunlight caught the sharp planes of his face, highlighting the features she knew as well as her own. Handsome, yes. Devastatingly so. But now, looking at him felt like staring into the heart of a catastrophe. He wasn't just her friend, her boss. He was the biggest mistake of her life, lying peacefully while her world imploded. Turning, she tiptoed towards the door, her breath held tight in her chest. Her fingers closed around the cold metal of the handle. Slowly, silently, she turned it, pulled the heavy door open just enough to slip through, and closed it behind her with a barely audible click. Standing alone in the quiet, carpeted hallway, Eliza finally let out the breath she'd been holding in a ragged, shaky sigh. She leaned her forehead against the cool wood of the door, eyes squeezed shut. Running away felt cowardly, childish even. But staying? Staying was impossible. The click of the lock felt final, sealing her escape from the room, but she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that she hadn't escaped the consequences. Not even close. The real storm was just beginning, and the path back to normalcy, if one even existed, was entirely hidden from view. Echoes of avoidance. Back in the sterile anonymity of her own apartment, the door locked firmly behind her, Eliza leaned against it, gasping as if she'd run a marathon. The escape from the hotel room felt less like freedom and more like stepping from a burning building into the path of an oncoming train. The quiet hum of her refrigerator was deafening after the frantic pounding of her heart. She kicked off her shoes, the elegant heels now feeling like instruments of torture, remnants of a night she desperately needed to erase. But how could you erase Julian Croft? The weekend became a blur of self-imposed confinement. Shades drawn, phone silenced, takeout cartons accumulating guiltily on the coffee table. Sleep offered little respite, haunted by fractured images, clinking glasses, the roar of laughter at some long-forgotten joke during the university reunion, Julian's easy smile across a crowded room, and then, infuriatingly, nothing. A gaping black hole where the crucial events should have been. What had happened between the toasts and the tangle of limbs in that too-soft hotel bed? Her mind circled obsessively around one damning fact: Julian had driven to the reunion. He hadn't been drinking, not really. A polite sip here and there, perhaps, but he'd been the designated driver for their usual small group. Which meant, oh God. Which meant the fault, the instigation, the catastrophic lapse in judgment, was likely hers. Entirely hers. The thought made her want to curl up and disappear. She pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes, trying to block out the image of those marks on his shoulder. Her fault. Her shame. Monday loomed like an executioner's block. The thought of walking into Croft Enterprises, of potentially bumping into him by the elevators, of sitting in the sleek conference room under his cool, appraising gaze, it sent waves of cold dread through her. Maybe she could call in sick? Claim food poisoning? Resign? Yes, resignation felt like the only viable option. Burn the bridge, salt the earth, disappear. But Julian, it seemed, had other plans. Her phone, resurrected from its silent purgatory late Sunday afternoon, began to buzz with unnerving persistence. Julian Croft. The name glowed on the screen, each vibration a fresh jolt to her frayed nerves. She ignored the first call. And the second. By the 10th, a grim certainty settled over her. Avoidance wasn't working. He wouldn't let it. With trembling fingers, she finally swiped to answer on the 11th ring. Downstairs. 10 minutes. His voice was clipped, coolly efficient. The voice of Julian Croft, CEO. Not Julian, her friend. Not Julian, the man she'd woken up beside less than 48 hours ago. No preamble, no how are you. Just an order. Defiance warred with resignation. Running wasn't an option when he parked his gleaming black sedan, a silent, powerful statement, directly beneath her window. Dragging herself downstairs felt like walking the plank. She pulled open the heavy car door, the scent of expensive leather and faint, familiar cologne assaulting her senses. She had a speech prepared, something about acknowledging the awkwardness, agreeing to move past it like mature adults, preserving their professional relationship. But the words died before they even formed. He didn't look at her as she slid into the passenger seat. Instead, he pressed a steaming travel mug into her hands. Hot milk. Seriously? Your cycle's due soon, right? He stated, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. Don't use our connection as an excuse for tardiness, Eliza. Punctuality remains paramount. Eliza choked on the warm milk, stunned into silence. Our connection? Was that his euphemism for the one-night stand that had shattered her universe? He spoke as if discussing quarterly reports, his tone devoid of warmth, irony, or any acknowledgement of the massive, unspoken tension filling the car. It was masterful deflection. Or perhaps it simply hadn't registered on his Richter scale of significance? The thought was both insulting and terrifyingly plausible. She stared fixedly out the side window, watching the familiar city streets blur past, the carefully rehearsed speech about mutual understanding turning to ash in her mouth. He hadn't mentioned it. Not a word. As if she'd merely imagined waking up in his arms, imagined the frantic escape. Then, as they idled at a red light, he dropped the next grenade, his tone utterly casual. Dinner tomorrow night, by the way. Bringing the new girlfriend along. Thought you should meet her. Her head snapped towards him. New girlfriend? The words came out sharper than she intended. Barely days had passed since the rumored demise of his last liaison. He had a rotation speed that defied logic. Julian merely shrugged, a flicker of something unreadable, amusement? Indifference? In his eyes before the light changed and the car surged forward. This one might stick around. He didn't sound convinced. Eliza slumped back against the leather seat, reeling. Hot milk and workplace warnings 1 minute, a new girlfriend the next, all while completely ignoring the chasm that had opened between them. The sheer nonchalance was breathtaking. It left her feeling wrong-footed, dismissed, and strangely, stung. That flicker of unexpected feeling, sharp and unwelcome, pricked at her again. Was this disappointment? Or something infuriatingly close to jealousy? Whatever it was, his cool indifference was rapidly becoming more agonizing than outright confrontation would have been, leaving her adrift in a sea of confusion as they pulled up towards the imposing glass tower of Croft Enterprises. The blind date gambit. That strange, unsettling prickle of something lingered long after Eliza stepped out of Julian's car and into the gleaming, slightly intimidating lobby of Croft Enterprises. His casual mention of a new girlfriend, delivered with that unnerving nonchalance, echoed in her ears, mixing poisonously with the memory of the hotel room and his baffling behavior. The disconnect was jarring, leaving her feeling like she was walking through a fog, unable to grasp the reality of her situation. Work, usually her refuge, her area of competence, became a minefield. Her focus, normally laser-sharp, fractured under the weight of unspoken anxieties. Numbers swam on spreadsheets, transposing themselves with malicious glee. Deadlines felt simultaneously distant and terrifyingly immediate. She found herself double, triple-checking emails, convinced she'd missed some crucial detail, addressed someone incorrectly, committed some unpardonable professional sin. And the most unnerving part? Julian's silence. He presided over meetings with his usual cool authority, his gaze occasionally sweeping over her, but the sharp, incisive critiques she usually braced herself for never materialized. A misplaced decimal on the Q3 projections report, an error that would normally have earned her a quiet but surgically precise dressing down, went unmentioned. He simply corrected it himself with a flick of his pen during a review, his expression unreadable. This leniency was, bizarrely, more unsettling than his anger would have been. It felt like another layer of the confusing game he seemed to be playing, a game where she didn't know the rules, let alone how to win. It wasn't always like this, of course. She vividly remembered the infamous Oakland incident from 2 years prior. A massively important potential client flying in for final negotiations. Eliza, juggling too many tasks, had somehow booked their cross-country flights into Oakland instead of San Francisco International. A seemingly small error with catastrophic logistical consequences. Cue frantic scrambling, exorbitant last-minute car services, and nearly 3 hours of a very important client fuming in the wrong airport lounge. Julian had, naturally, smoothed things over with the client, his charm offensive legendary when deployed. But the internal debrief? Brutal. In front of her entire project team, he dissected her mistake with icy precision, laying bare every point of failure, every assumption she shouldn't have made. She'd felt about 2 inches tall, humiliation burning hot behind her eyes. Just as tears threatened, he'd abruptly concluded the meeting. Later, hunched over her desk drafting a resignation letter fueled by shame and fury, a message had pinged on her screen from him. Argento. 8 p.m. Don't be late. Argento. The ridiculously exclusive steakhouse she'd mentioned wanting to try months ago. No apology, no direct acknowledgement of the preceding evisceration. Just that. And damn him, it had worked. Her anger, righteous as it was, had deflated, replaced by a grudging acceptance of their bizarre dynamic. He could be the most demanding, exacting boss from hell, but he was also Julian. The friend who somehow knew exactly which obscure indie band she loved, who remembered the specific brand of ridiculously expensive Swiss chocolate she craved when stressed, who could anticipate her needs with unnerving accuracy. How could one person be both? A ruthless CEO and the keeper of her trivial secrets? That deep, tangled familiarity felt like a safety net one moment and a suffocating trap the next. He was handsome, capable, undeniably brilliant, and a notorious commitment phobe, cycling through girlfriends with alarming speed. Serial monogamist was the kind term. Playboy felt more accurate most days. Yet, he'd always presented Eliza to them straightforwardly. This is Eliza, my best friend. A title that felt increasingly inadequate and complicated. As if the Julian-induced turmoil wasn't enough, her mother chose that week to launch a renewed campaign. The phone calls started subtly. Gentle inquiries about her social life. Then came the not-so-subtle hints. Darling, you're 31 now. Such a wonderful age, but, well, time does march on, doesn't it? Followed by the inevitable comparison to perfectly married cousins and the ticking of the dreaded biological clock. Eliza usually deflected with practiced ease, but this time, her defenses felt weak. And her mother, sensing vulnerability, pounced. There's a lovely young man, Liam Hayes. Patricia's son, you remember Patricia Wells? He's just back from finishing his doctorate in engineering overseas. Very bright, very stable. I bumped into Patricia, and we thought, well, just coffee? What could it hurt? Eliza resisted. Vehemently at first. A blind date was the absolute last thing she needed. But her mother's gentle insistence wore her down, combined with a treacherous internal voice whispering that maybe, just maybe, a distraction was exactly what she required. A normal, uncomplicated coffee date. Something blessedly free of history and hidden meanings. So, she'd reluctantly agreed. Saturday afternoon. The Gilded Spoon Cafe, near the park. Saturday arrived, gray and uncertain. Eliza dressed with a sigh, choosing something deliberately understated. As she headed downstairs, her phone buzzed. Julian. Need a lift? Heading downtown anyway. Her thumbs hovered over the screen. Refuse? Make an excuse? But the thought of navigating public transport while her nerves were already shot felt exhausting. Sure. Thanks, she typed back, ignoring the immediate knot of anxiety in her stomach. He was waiting, leaning against the side of his car, radiating that effortless, infuriating confidence. He held the passenger door open, his eyes scanning her face as she slid in. The usual tension was back, thick and palpable in the confined space. So, he began, pulling smoothly into traffic, his voice carefully neutral. This blind date. Liam Hayes, your mom said? Don't think I know the name. What's the story? The questions felt too casual, his interest too pointed. I don't know, Eliza mumbled, focusing on the buildings flashing past. Mom set it up. He just got back from abroad. Julian hummed softly, a non-committal sound. He glanced sideways at her, and for a moment, his gaze wasn't neutral at all. It was sharp, probing, an intensity lurking beneath the surface that made her shift uncomfortably in her seat. As they neared the cafe, he slowed the car. Well. Hope he's not terribly dull. She forced a tight smile, grabbing her purse. Thanks for the ride, Julian. Scrambling out of the car felt like escaping a magnetic field. She didn't look back, but she could feel his eyes on her as she pushed open the door to the Gilded Spoon, stepping into the warm, coffee-scented air towards a meeting that now felt less like a potential escape and more like walking into another unknown variable in her increasingly chaotic life. Sparks, stares, and scathing words. Pushing through the cafe door, Eliza deliberately shut out the image of Julian's car, the probing intensity of his gaze. The warm scent of coffee and baked goods offered a fragile shield. Her eyes scanned the room, searching for, well, she wasn't sure. A generic nice young man? Her mother's descriptions had been vague. Then, a man standing near the window turned, catching her eye, and a jolt of surprise, utterly different from the anxiety Julian provoked, shot through her. Liam Hayes. It couldn't be. But it was. The slightly gangly, serious boy with perpetually ink-stained fingers from Mrs. Davison's third-grade class had somehow transformed. He was tall now, lean, with the same thoughtful eyes behind stylish dark-rimmed glasses, but the youthful uncertainty had been replaced by a quiet confidence. A warm, genuine smile spread across his face as recognition dawned on him too. Eliza Vance? No way. The tension that had coiled in her shoulders since waking up in that hotel room began, miraculously, to ease. Laughter bubbled up, spontaneous and real. Liam. Wow. It's been a long time. The next hour flew by in a comfortable blur of shared history. They reminisced about their childhood neighborhood, the ancient oak tree they'd both tried to climb, the terrifying myths surrounding old Mr. Henderson's prize-winning petunias. Liam talked easily about his years abroad, his doctoral research in renewable energy, he held 2 patents, surprisingly, and his genuine excitement about returning home, wanting to apply his work locally rather than chasing bigger offers elsewhere. There was an earnestness about him, an uncomplicated integrity that felt like a breath of fresh air after the suffocating complexity of Julian. For a blissful hour, Eliza almost forgot the chaos simmering beneath the surface of her life. Almost. As they stepped back out onto the bustling sidewalk, bathed in the late afternoon sun, she felt a prickle of awareness, a sixth sense honed by years of proximity to Julian Croft. She didn't look, didn't dare confirm, but she felt his disapproval radiating from somewhere down the street, a silent, icy counterpoint to the warmth of Liam's company. She found herself rushing her goodbyes to Liam just a fraction, pulling him towards the subway entrance perhaps a touch too eagerly after he secured her promise for a date the following Saturday, a play he'd been wanting to see. Okay, I'm going. Liam laughed, holding up his hands in mock surrender as she practically shoved him towards the turnstiles. See you Saturday, Eliza. His easy grin lingered in her mind as she walked home, a pleasant counter-melody to the usual Julian-centric static. Liam was nice. Genuinely nice. Smart, successful, grounded. Everything her mother could hope for. Everything she should probably hope for. Back in the quiet sanctuary of her apartment, she kicked off her shoes and padded towards the kitchen, intending to make tea. She passed the calendar hanging by the fridge, paused to mark the upcoming playdate with Liam, and froze. Her gaze snagged on the date. Then scanned back. Then forward again. A cold fist clenched in her stomach. 15 days. Her period, usually as reliable as a Swiss watch, was 15 days late. How had she not noticed? How, amidst the Julian-induced panic and the blind date distraction, had she missed something so fundamental? The pleasant warmth from her time with Liam evaporated instantly, replaced by a chilling dread. The hotel room. The tangled sheets. The undeniable reality of the one-night stand. It couldn't be. Could it? The rest of the evening dissolved into a spiral of anxiety. Pacing the length of her small living room. Frantically Googling symptoms, likelihoods, reasons for delay that didn't involve the terrifying P-word. Each search result seemed to tighten the knot of fear in her chest. Sleep was impossible. By morning, the uncertainty was unbearable. Slipping out unnoticed, she made a furtive trip to the small pharmacy down the block, her face burning as she mumbled her request for a pregnancy test, shoving the small box deep into her purse as if it were illegal contraband. Walking back towards her building later that evening, clutching her purse like a shield, she almost collided with him. Julian. Leaning against the brick wall by her entrance, impeccably dressed as always, scrolling through something on his phone. He looked up as she approached, his eyes doing that quick, assessing sweep that always made her feel exposed. Rough day? He asked, his voice smooth. Eliza jumped, instinctively tightening her grip on her purse, trying to angle it behind her back. No. Fine. Just long. Was her voice shaking? God, she hoped not. He raised an eyebrow, unconvinced. You seem distracted. More than usual. A ghost of a smile played on his lips. Before she could formulate a non-incriminating reply, he pushed off the wall. Anyway. Isabel and I called it quits. Isabel Moreau. The lithe, impossibly elegant ballerina he'd been seeing for, almost 3 whole weeks. A new record, maybe. Felt like grabbing a drink. You free? Eliza stared at him. Another breakup. Another casual discard. She remembered his supposed philosophy, the quest for some elusive perfection, cutting losses the moment a potential future flaw appeared. Bullshit, she thought, with sudden clarity. It wasn't perfectionism, it was fear. Or maybe just plain boredom. He built walls of temporary affection, dismantling them before anything real could take root. Right now, though, his romantic revolving door was the least of her worries. The small, square box in her purse felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Sorry, Julian, she heard herself say, the words surprisingly steady. Not tonight. I have plans. She brushed past him, fumbling for her keys, acutely aware of his surprised silence behind her. It was the first time, she realized, that she'd ever turned him down flat when he sought her out for a post-breakup commiseration session. But tonight, her own potential crisis dwarfed his predictable relationship drama. Inside her apartment, the unopened test sat on her kitchen counter, a silent, terrifying arbiter of her future. Confrontation and a calculated choice. The small plastic stick felt impossibly heavy in Eliza's hand. She stared at the single pink line in the results window, her breath catching in her throat. One line. Negative. A wave of relief so profound it left her weak need washed over her, sending her sinking onto the edge of the bathtub. Thank God. Oh, thank God. For a dizzying moment, she allowed herself to imagine the alternative, the horrifying what if spiraling outwards, before forcefully shoving the thoughts away. Close call. Too close. But she was safe. For now. That narrow escape lent a fragile buoyancy to the following week. By Saturday evening, as she prepared for her date with Liam Hayes to see the play, Eliza felt a flicker of something almost like hope. Maybe this was it. Maybe a normal date with a normal, kind, uncomplicated man was the antidote she needed to the poison ivy entanglement that was her relationship with Julian Croft. She arrived at the Orpheum Theatre a few minutes early, smoothing down her dress, trying to ignore the nervous flutter in her stomach. The lobby buzzed with pre-show chatter, a sea of expectant faces. And then, across the plush carpet, she saw her. Isabelle Moreau. Julian's most recent ex, the ballerina. Tall, elegant, and radiating an Arctic chill that seemed directed solely at Eliza. Isabel's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile as she glided towards her, heels clicking ominously on the marble floor. Eliza Vance, Isabel purred, her voice dripping with saccharine venom. Still orbiting Julian, I see. Some things never change. Eliza stiffened. Isabel. Nice to see you. Politeness felt like a shield, albeit a flimsy one. Isabel laughed, a brittle sound that drew glances from nearby theatergoers. Oh, spare me the pleasantries. We both know what you are. The perpetual best friend. The one he always runs back to, the excuse he uses to discard the rest of us. I think you're misunderstanding our relationship, Eliza began, keeping her voice low, acutely aware of the widening circle of attention. Misunderstanding? Isabel's voice rose, sharp and cutting. Was I misunderstanding when he ditched our anniversary trip to Geneva because you called crying about a sprained ankle? Drove halfway across the continent overnight? Or how about when he cancelled reservations I'd made months in advance at Leclerc because you decided you weren't in the mood for French? Tell me, Eliza, does that sound like normal friendship to you? Each accusation landed like a physical blow. Eliza remembered the Geneva incident. She'd slipped on icy pavement, genuinely hurt and panicked, and yes, Julian had come. She'd been overwhelmed with gratitude then. But hearing it spat back now, twisted with Isabel's jealousy, it sounded different. Wrong. The restaurant incident too. Had she been that casually demanding? Had he been that readily accommodating at Isabel's expense? Heat crept up her neck as she realized people were openly staring now, whispering. Isabel, that's not fair. She started, but her defense felt weak even to her own ears. Isn't it? Isabel leaned in, her eyes glittering with malice. Face it. You enjoy the benefits without any of the commitment. You keep him tethered. Honestly, being single like you clearly are? It just pollutes the dating pool for the rest of us. Eliza felt speechless, cornered. Just as she braced for another verbal assault, a calm presence materialized beside her. Liam. He'd arrived unnoticed amidst the drama. Is everything all right here? Liam asked, his voice quiet but firm, positioning himself slightly in front of Eliza. He didn't raise his voice, didn't engage with the specifics, but his solid presence was an immediate de-escalation. Isabel shot him a dismissive glare, then gave Eliza one last look dripping with contempt before turning on her heel and stalking away. Are you okay? Liam asked gently, his brow furrowed with concern. Eliza could only nod, feeling shaky and exposed. Liam didn't press. He simply offered her his arm, guiding her through the now murmuring crowd towards the theater doors. She spent the entire play in a daze, Isabel's toxic words replaying in her mind. Pollutes the dating pool. Normal friendship? Walking her home afterwards through the cool night air, Liam didn't pry about the scene in the lobby. Instead, with a hesitant sincerity that touched her despite her turmoil, he laid his own cards on the table. Look, Eliza, he started, pausing under a streetlight, I know tonight was weird. But I wanted to be upfront. I'm back home for good. I'm setting up my research lab, looking for a place to buy, not rent. I'm not interested in playing games. I'm looking for something real. He met her eyes, his expression open and earnest. And I'd really like to see if that could be with you. His straightforwardness was startling, refreshing. He was offering exactly what she theoretically wanted: stability, honesty, a drama-free zone. Yet, looking at his kind face, she felt a profound sense of nothing. Numbness. Her emotional landscape was a battlefield, ravaged by the Julian situation, and she had nothing left to offer this genuinely good man. Liam, She started, unsure how to respond without hurting him. Back in her apartment, the silence felt heavy. She showered, trying to wash away the lingering humiliation from the theater lobby. As she towel-dried her hair, her phone buzzed on the counter. A text. From Julian. Heard the theater was dramatic tonight. Hope your date wasn't too scarred. The casual cruelty of it, the smug little wink emoji, it ignited a spark of anger through her numbness. He knew. He always knew how to get under her skin. Isabel's accusations echoed again, fueled by his taunting message. The Geneva trip. The cancelled dinners. The constant orbit. Was she just a convenient emotional fallback? She thought of Liam. Steady, decent Liam, offering sincerity she couldn't fully accept because her insides were tied in knots over a man who treated relationships like disposable commodities. A wave of defiant resolve washed over her. Maybe Isabel was right in one sense: she needed to stop polluting the pool. She needed to make a choice, even if her heart wasn't fully in it. Picking up her phone, she ignored Julian's text and pulled up her conversation with Liam. Her fingers hesitated, then typed. Tonight was eventful. But thank you for handling it. And yes, I'd like to see you again. Let's give this a try. She hit send before she could second guess herself, the message flying off into the digital ether like a fragile paper boat launched into a turbulent sea. Barbecues, burns, and buried truths. Hitting send on the text to Liam felt less like a decision and more like jumping off a cliff hoping for a soft landing. His reply came back almost instantly, warm, enthusiastic, endearingly uncomplicated. It should have felt good. Simple. Instead, it just added another layer to the knot tightening in Eliza's stomach. Because now, she had to tell Julian. Procrastination only stretched the inevitable taut. Finally, summoning a shaky breath, she dialed his number, the familiar sequence feeling foreign and treacherous on her fingertips. He answered on the second ring, his voice the usual smooth baritone. Vance. What's up? She stumbled through it, hating how small her voice sounded. Julian, I just wanted to let you know. I decided to, well, Liam Hayes and I are going to try dating. Silence. Not a long one, but heavy enough for her to hear her own blood rushing in her ears. She braced for, she didn't know what. Anger? Mockery? Indifference? What came was worse. A low chuckle, dangerously soft. Liam Hayes? Patricia Wells' kid? Ha. Okay. Another pause, then, dripping with false bonhomie, well, that's proactive of you, Eliza. Good. You should get out more. Then, the inevitable twist. Actually, perfect timing. I was thinking we should all do a beach barbecue next weekend. Chloe's dying to meet you properly, and I should probably vet this Hayes character for you. Make sure he's up to snuff, right? Best friend duties. Eliza felt a familiar wave of frustrated helplessness wash over her. Vet him? Check if he was up to snuff? The possessiveness underlying the casual words was suffocating. It wasn't friendship, it was ownership. But arguing felt futile, like wrestling smoke. Sure, Julian, she heard herself agree, the word tasting like defeat. Sounds great. The following week saw tentative steps into dating Liam. He was relentlessly thoughtful, remembering she preferred chai lattes to coffee, walking her home even when it was out of his way, listening patiently as she talked about work frustrations, carefully omitting any Julian-related specifics, of course. One evening, crossing the street, his hand tentatively found hers. His palm was warm, slightly calloused, his grip gentle. It felt nice. Safe. Normal. And for a fleeting, treacherous second, a thought flickered: if Julian wasn't in the picture, could this actually work? Could I like Liam? Really like him? The thought vanished as quickly as it came, leaving an uncomfortable residue of guilt. The day of the barbecue dawned bright and offensively cheerful. Liam arrived at her apartment first, looking endearingly earnest, clutching a reusable bag filled with gourmet snacks he'd picked up. Figured we shouldn't show up empty-handed, he grinned, pushing his glasses up his nose. Then, Julian's sleek sedan pulled up, a silent assertion of dominance. Predictably, he insisted they all ride together. And predictably, Eliza found herself maneuvered into the passenger seat, Liam relegated to the back with Julian's latest accessory, Chloe Summers. Chloe was young, blonde, and seemed to vibrate with an anxious energy, desperate to please Julian and slightly intimidated by Eliza's history with him. The small talk during the drive to the rented beach villa was excruciatingly stilted. The villa itself was stunning, all glass and ocean views, but the atmosphere remained thick with unspoken tensions. Julian and Liam were assigned grill duty, a task that quickly devolved into a passive-aggressive battle of wills involving lighter fluid and airflow techniques. Julian, naturally, dismissed all of Liam's perfectly sensible suggestions. Eliza and Chloe chopped vegetables in near silence, punctuated only by Chloe's nervous chatter about Julian's brilliance. Failure seemed inevitable. After nearly half an hour of fruitless effort, with only pathetic wisps of smoke curling from the charcoal, Eliza sighed. Maybe we should just call the property manager? They probably have a gas grill somewhere. No need, Julian snapped, crouching stubbornly by the useless briquettes, his jaw tight. Fine. Let him play caveman. Eliza turned to suggest a walk on the beach to Chloe, just to escape the awkwardness. Chaos erupted behind her. A loud clatter, a shower of sparks, and a sudden whoosh as scattered coals ignited the dry dune grass nearby. Eliza whirled around. The portable grill lay on its side. Julian was standing right beside it, swatting at his sleeve, a dark smudge already blooming on the expensive fabric. A sharp gasp escaped her lips. Instinct, primal and immediate, screamed at her to run to him, check if he was hurt. She took an involuntary step forward. Julian! Oh my God, are you okay? Chloe's shriek pierced the air. At the same moment, Eliza saw Liam jump back, shaking his hand where a stray ember must have landed. Her forward momentum stalled. Two injured men. One, her boss, her oldest friend, the epicenter of her current turmoil. The other, her new boyfriend, the symbol of attempted normalcy. Isabel Moreau's spiteful words echoed in her head, why do you have to say you're best friends to enjoy his favoritism? No. She wouldn't give anyone that ammunition. Not again. With a deliberate effort that felt like tearing something inside herself, Eliza turned away from Julian and hurried towards Liam. Liam! Are you all right? Let me see your hand. It was barely red, a tiny mark already fading. Nothing. I'm fine, Eliza, really, he assured her, looking more concerned about the general chaos. Eliza! The voice that cut through the air was low, laced with a fury she hadn't heard since the Oakland incident. She looked up, meeting Julian's blazing eyes. He was cradling his left forearm, the skin beneath the now blackened sleeve an angry, alarming red. Are you fucking blind? Or just playing dumb? Can't you see I'm the one who's actually injured here? His raw anger slammed into her, staggering her more than the initial shock of the accident. The unfairness of it, the blatant demand for her attention above all else, it solidified her resolve. She lifted her chin, meeting his furious gaze with a cool mask she didn't feel. Beside him, Chloe hovered uselessly, eyes wide with panic. Chloe, Eliza said, her voice steady as she addressed the younger woman, deliberately excluding Julian. You should probably get some ice on that. Maybe drive him to urgent care, just in case. She didn't register Julian's reaction. Didn't dare look. She turned back to Liam, busying herself with inspecting his perfectly fine hand, needing the physical act of tending to him to anchor her against the tidal pull towards Julian. This was the boundary. This was the choice. It felt brittle, forced, and utterly necessary, even as a cold dread began to seep into the cracks of her determination, whispering that this defiance would come at a cost. The afternoon, meant to be a cautious step forward, had dissolved into acrimony and injury, leaving behind only the smoky scent of failure and the chilling certainty that things were about to get much, much worse. And beneath it all, the quiet, persistent drumbeat of anxiety, her period was still missing, now terrifyingly, undeniably late. The unmistakable truth and drastic measures. The disastrous barbecue cast a long, uncomfortable shadow. Julian, Eliza heard through the office grapevine via a subdued text from Chloe, had suffered second-degree burns but was managing things from home, his displeasure presumably simmering alongside his injury. Eliza focused on work with grim determination, trying desperately to ignore the date looming larger on her calendar. But 6 weeks after that fateful reunion night, the denial became impossible. Her period, usually punctual to the day, was defiantly, terrifyingly absent. Okay, that's it, Maya-chan, her oldest friend and current roommate, declared one evening, finding Eliza staring blankly at her untouched dinner. Maya had been the recipient of Eliza's heavily edited, tearful confession about the one-night stand, omitting the boss part, of course. You bought that test over a week ago. It was negative. Fine. But 6 weeks, Eli? That's not a little late. That's go see a doctor late. Now. Maya's no-nonsense tone finally broke through Eliza's paralysis. The dread was suffocating, but the not knowing was somehow worse. She took a half-day off work, the lie about a dental emergency tasting like ash in her mouth, and found herself sitting in the sterile waiting room of a women's health clinic, clutching her purse so tightly her knuckles were white. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic, mingling with the cloying scent of cheap air freshener. Every tick of the clock on the wall seemed to echo the frantic pounding in her chest. After what felt like an eternity, a nurse called her back for a blood draw, her professional cheeriness grating on Eliza's raw nerves. Then came another endless wait before a doctor, kind-faced but businesslike, summoned her into a small consulting room. The doctor reviewed the chart, then looked at Eliza over her glasses. Well, Ms. Vance, sometimes home tests, especially if taken very early, can produce a false negative. The doctor paused, her gaze softening slightly. The blood test is definitive, however. You are pregnant. Based on your dates, approximately 10 weeks along. The words hit Eliza like a physical force, knocking the air from her lungs. Pregnant. 10 weeks. The room seemed to tilt, the doctor's subsequent explanations about options and next steps dissolving into an incomprehensible buzz. It was as if she were suddenly encased in glass, watching the scene unfold from a distance. Shock, cold and absolute, numbed her limbs, silenced the panic, leaving only a vast, echoing emptiness. She vaguely registered the nurse's voice calling her name, guiding her out, pressing a pamphlet into her numb fingers. Stumbling out of the clinic into the bright, indifferent sunlight, she collided straight into someone. Oh, excuse me, Eliza? Eliza Vance, is that you? Eliza blinked, focusing on the familiar, smiling face of Megan Sharma, a bubbly classmate from high school she hadn't seen in years. Megan? Hi. Wow. I thought it was you. Megan beamed, oblivious to Eliza's shell-shocked state. You look amazing. Still knocking M dead at Croft Enterprises, I assume? And still with Julian Croft, right? Honestly, everyone in our year always said you two were endgame. The casual assumption, the reinforcement of that public perception, felt like another turn of the screw. Thanks, Megan, Eliza managed, forcing a smile that felt like cracking plaster. Julian's, fine. But no, we're not together. Just friends. Boss and employee, actually. Megan's jaw dropped. No way. Seriously? But you guys were always, wow. Okay. Well, hey, we should totally grab coffee sometime. Catch up properly. Megan squeezed her arm, rattled off her number, and bustled away, leaving Eliza feeling even more adrift. Everyone thought they should be together. Everyone except them. Until, now? The walk back to Maya's apartment was a blur. The reality finally began to penetrate the numbness. Pregnant. With Julian's child. A tiny life, 10 weeks old, was growing inside her, a living consequence of one night of drunken recklessness. And Liam. Kind, decent Liam, who deserved honesty, who deserved someone fully present. Staying with him now, under these circumstances, it was unthinkable. Unfair. Impossible. That evening, she met him at a quiet cafe, the task ahead feeling like lifting lead weights. He smiled when he saw her, that open, guileless smile, and her heart ached with preemptive guilt. She ordered coffee she couldn't drink, struggled to meet his eyes. Liam, I. The words caught in her throat. How could she do this? He waited patiently, concern clouding his features. Eliza? What's wrong? She took a deep breath. We can't continue this. I'm so sorry. It's not you, truly. You've been wonderful. But it wouldn't be fair to you. I'm not in the right place. His hand, holding his cup, trembled almost imperceptibly. Coffee sloshed onto the saucer. He looked down, then met her gaze, a flicker of hurt quickly masked by understanding. He didn't pry, didn't demand explanations, didn't even ask if it was Julian, though the unspoken question hung in the air. He simply nodded slowly. Okay, Eliza. I understand. I respect your decision. His quiet dignity somehow made it worse. She fled the cafe feeling both relief and a profound, aching sorrow. With that painful task done, a grim resolve took hold. Julian was in Hong Kong for a week-long business trip. Now was the time. The next day, avoiding sympathetic glances from colleagues who knew something was wrong, she walked into HR and submitted her resignation, effective immediately. No explanations, no forwarding address. Just, gone. She couldn't face her parents, not like this. Maya, bless her steadfast loyalty, took her in without question. For days, Eliza wrestled with the final, monumental decision. She was 31, nearly 32. She'd dreamed of marriage, of children, but not like this. Not conceived in chaos, destined for secrecy or conflict. It felt irresponsible, reckless, to bring a child into such a tangled mess. With a heavy heart, feeling impossibly old and terrifyingly alone despite Maya's presence, she picked up the phone and made the appointment at the clinic. The procedure was scheduled for the following week. It felt like the only path forward, a drastic measure to contain an impossible situation before it spiraled completely out of control. The uninvited groom. Walking towards the procedure room at Havenwood Women's Clinic felt like stepping onto a conveyor belt moving inexorably towards a cliff edge. Eliza felt strangely detached, observing herself change into the thin cotton gown, lying down on the narrow, cold table, staring up at the unforgiving fluorescent lights. Numbness was a mercy, she supposed. Maya had offered, pleaded even, to come with her, but Eliza had refused. This grim decision, this necessary erasure, felt like something she had to face alone. A final, solitary act in a drama she hadn't auditioned for. The masked doctor entered, her movements efficient, her eyes kind but professional behind her glasses. She checked the chart. Eliza Vance? Yes. Her voice was a dry whisper. Age 31? Yes. The doctor made a final notation. And you've had time to consider this decision carefully? You're certain this is the path you wish to take? Certain? Was anyone ever certain about something like this? She closed her eyes, the fluorescent lights burning faint afterimages onto her retinas. Think carefully? The phrase snagged on a memory, sharp and unexpectedly poignant. College. Sitting on the sun-warmed bleachers after a basketball game, sharing a lukewarm soda with Julian. He'd nudged her playfully. Vance, seriously. Miller asked you out. He's a decent guy. If you keep shooting everyone down, you're going to die alone surrounded by cats, you know that? She'd thrown a piece of ice at him, laughing. Better alone than dating boring finance bros like Miller, Croft. Besides, I have you to annoy. He'd grinned back, that easy, infuriatingly charming grin. Yeah, well, don't expect me to share my popcorn forever. Such a simple moment. Light years away from the cold, sterile reality of this room. Boom! The sound shattered the quiet clinical air. The procedure room door slammed open, hitting the wall with violent force. Eliza flinched, eyes snapping open, heart instantly catapulting into her throat. Shouts erupted from the hallway. Nurses' voices, raised in protest. A deeper voice, low and guttural with rage, cutting through them like a blade. His voice. Oh God. No. Not here. How? Before she could fully process it, he was there, filling the doorway, radiating an aura of controlled fury that sucked the air from the room. Julian. His face was a thundercloud, eyes blazing with an intensity she'd never seen directed at her, not even during the worst of his workplace critiques. He ignored the frantic nurses trying to block his path, ignored the doctor's sharp command for him to leave immediately. His gaze locked onto Eliza, lying exposed and vulnerable on the table. Get up. The command was flat, absolute. Sir, you cannot be in here. The doctor protested, stepping forward. Julian didn't even glance at her. He strode directly to the table, his hand clamping around Eliza's bare arm like a vice. The shock of his touch, the sheer unexpectedness of his presence, sent a jolt through her numbness. Julian, what are you? He didn't let her finish. With startling strength, he hauled her upright, off the table, the thin gown tangling around her legs. She stumbled, a cry of shock and humiliation escaping her lips. Nurses gasped, rushing forward, but Julian shoved them aside, his movements economical and brutal. He grabbed a sheet or blanket from somewhere, throwing it unceremoniously around her shoulders, then propelled her towards the door he'd just burst through. The journey through the clinic corridors was a nightmare blur of shocked faces, echoing protests, and Julian's relentless, bruising grip on her arm. He didn't speak, didn't acknowledge the chaos swirling around them. He just moved forward, a man possessed, dragging her in his wake. He bundled her into the passenger seat of his sedan, the door slamming shut with terrifying finality. He rounded the car, slid behind the wheel, and the engine roared to life. They tore away from the curb, the silence in the car thick with his rage and her